I've heard the sounds for 3 years, scratching, dragging, slow, heavy footsteps above my bedroom ceiling at 2 a.m. I told myself it was raccoons, squirrels, maybe a possum that found a way in through a gap in the eaves. I told myself that for 3 years because the alternative, the thing my brain kept whispering in the dark, was too impossible to take seriously. Then last Tuesday, the exterminator went up into my attic. He was up there for 4 minutes. When he came back down, he was white as paper, shaking, and he refused to go back up. He said, and I will never forget these words for the rest of my life, "Sir, whatever is living up there, it isn't an animal."
My name is Tom. I'm 44 years old, and I have lived in my house for 11 years. It's a large, older home, built in the 1930s, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, the kind of house that has character and history, and, as I have recently discovered, secrets. The sounds started about 3 years ago. At first, they were easy to dismiss, a soft scratching, intermittent, coming from somewhere above my bedroom. Old houses make noise. Everyone who has ever lived in one knows this. Pipes expand and contract. Wood settles. Wind finds gaps and creates strange acoustics. I put the scratching in the same mental folder as all the other nighttime sounds of an old building and went back to sleep. But over the following weeks, the sounds changed. The scratching became more deliberate. Not the random scatter of small claws, but something slower, more purposeful, and occasionally, mixed in with it, something I found harder to explain. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, moving in a pattern across the ceiling above my bed. I told myself raccoons. They're clever animals, heavier than people expect, and they move with a strange lumbering gait when they're comfortable in a space. I told myself a raccoon had found its way into my attic and made a home there, and that I simply needed to call someone to remove it. I called an exterminator, the first one. His name was Dave, and he'd been doing pest removal for 20 years. He went up through the attic hatch in my upstairs hallway, flashlight and inspection kit in hand, completely routine. He was up there for about 15 minutes. When he came down, he told me he'd found evidence of habitation, droppings, some disturbed insulation, what looked like a nest in the far corner near the chimney stack. He said it was almost certainly raccoons, possibly a small family group. He set some humane traps, gave me a quote for exclusion work to seal the entry points, and left. The traps caught nothing over the next 2 weeks. The sounds continued. I called Dave back. He went up again. Came down looking slightly less comfortable than the first time. Said the traps hadn't been touched, unusual for raccoons, which are typically bold and food-motivated. Said the nest had been moved, not disturbed or abandoned, moved, relocated to a different corner of the attic, as if whatever made it had decided it wanted to be somewhere else. He reset the traps and left. They caught nothing again. I called a second exterminator. The second exterminator, a younger guy named Phil who came recommended by my neighbor, lasted 3 minutes in my attic. 3 minutes. He came down the ladder faster than I would have thought a man of his size could move, nearly missing the bottom rung, and stood in my hallway breathing hard, with his flashlight still on, and his hand gripping the ladder like he needed something solid to hold. I asked him what he'd seen. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't want to go back up there." I pressed him. He was a professional. What had he seen that had spooked him this badly? He shook his head. He said the nest, which should have been in the far corner where Dave had found it, was directly above the attic hatch, right above the entry point, as if whatever made it had moved there specifically to be close to the opening, close to the way in and out. He said the nest was large, much larger than anything a raccoon would make. He said it was constructed. That was his word, constructed, not assembled or gathered, from insulation material, old fabric, what looked like clothing, and other items he couldn't identify in the dark. He said before he could look at it properly, he heard something. From the far end of the attic, the dark end, beyond where his flashlight reached. He said it sounded like breathing. He left immediately. He refunded my call-out fee without being asked and would not return my calls after that day. I should have called the police at that point, or a structural specialist, or literally anyone with official authority and the ability to investigate properly. Instead, and I recognize this was not rational, I decided to go up myself. I want to explain the logic, such as it was. This was my house. I had lived here for 11 years. Whatever was in that attic, animal, human, something I hadn't categorized yet, was in my space, above my bedroom, and I had been lying awake listening to it for 3 years. I was exhausted, and I was angry, and those two things together apparently overwhelm common sense. I went up on a Saturday afternoon, broad daylight. I had a powerful flashlight, my phone recording video, and I left my front door open so I could hear the street outside. I went up the ladder and raised my head through the hatch. The attic was large, ran the full length of the house, maybe 60 feet, the chimney stack rising through the center. Dusty and dim, and smelling of old wood and something else, something organic and warm and wrong that I noticed immediately and could not identify. The nest was directly above the hatch as Phil had described, close enough that I could have reached out and touched it without fully entering the attic. It was extraordinary, not in a good way. It was roughly circular, maybe 5 feet across, built up from layers of insulation, and I had to look twice to believe this. Clothing. Old clothing. A sweater I recognized as one that had gone missing from my bedroom 2 years ago. A flannel shirt I had assumed I'd lost on a camping trip. Items of mine, taken from somewhere inside my house, woven into the structure of this nest. Something had been coming down from the attic into my home. Something had been taking my things. I was processing this when I heard it, from the far end of the attic. Movement. Not the small scurrying of rodents, not the lumbering of a raccoon. Something large shifting its weight in the darkness beyond my flashlight's reach. A slow, deliberate repositioning, the way a person moves when they've been still for a long time and their body needs to adjust. I shined my flashlight towards it. The beam reached maybe 40 feet. Beyond it, another 20 feet of attic stretched into darkness. In the darkness, at the very edge of where my light gave out, I saw two things. Eyes. Catching my light the way eyes do in the dark, that pale, reflective flash, there and then gone as whatever they belonged to turned its face away from the beam. And beneath the eyes, just visible for a moment before it pulled back into the darkness, hands, pale, long-fingered, gripping one of the roof joists from below, the way you'd grip a railing, holding on. I went down that ladder and out of my house in under 10 seconds. I stood on my front lawn in the afternoon sunlight and I called the police, and I did not go back inside. The police searched the attic that evening. 4 officers, flashlights, the works. They found the nest. They found evidence of long-term habitation, the clothing, food remnants, other items taken from my house over what the detective estimated could be years. They found a section of eave at the far end where the boarding had been carefully, quietly removed and replaced repeatedly, an entry point from the outside, invisible unless you knew where to look. They did not find whoever had been living up there, gone before they arrived or hidden somewhere in the structure of the old house, in a space the officers didn't locate. Either possibility keeps me awake at night. The detective told me that what they found was consistent with a human being, a person having lived in my attic covertly for an extended period, accessing my home through the eave gap, moving through the house at night while I slept, taking food, taking clothing, living 12 feet above my bed for 3 years. I think about the sounds I heard, the slow, heavy footsteps at 2 a.m., the dragging, and I think about how many times I lay in the dark listening to those sounds and told myself, raccoons, just raccoons, and rolled over and went back to sleep, while something up there listened to me breathe and watched the light go out and waited. When did you last look in your attic? And when you went up there, did you check the dark end, The far end? Where the light doesn't reach? New AI horror story every single day. Subscribe and never miss one. Tell me in the comments, could you sleep in that house again after this?